August 1942. On the banks of the Volga River, a city burns. Within 6 months, this single city will consume more human lives than most wars in history consume in years. Soldiers will fight for a staircase, a factory floor, a single room. Historians will later call it the Rat War, because men fought like rats in basements, sewers, and rubble, clawing for every inch of broken concrete. This is the story of Stalingrad, the battle that broke the back of Nazi Germany, and the bloodiest single battle in human history. By the summer of 1942, Adolf Hitler's armies controlled most of continental Europe. Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, had pushed deep into Russian territory. But Hitler wanted more than territory. He wanted the oil fields of the Caucasus, and he wanted a city named after his greatest rival, Joseph Stalin. Stalingrad was not just a military target. It sat on the Volga River, a critical supply route. But more than that, it was a name, a symbol. Capturing it would be a propaganda triumph for Germany and a devastating blow to Soviet morale. Stalin understood this too. He issued Order 227, known as Not One Step Back. Soviet soldiers who retreated without orders could be shot by their own commanders. There would be no retreat from this city. In August 1942, the German Sixth Army, commanded by General Friedrich Paulus, approached the city. The Luftwaffe launched a devastating bombing campaign. Thousands of tons of bombs fell in a single week, reducing much of Stalingrad to rubble and killing tens of thousands of civilians in the opening days alone. But the destruction created an unexpected problem for the Germans. The rubble became a fortress. Wide streets turned into deadly kill zones. Bombed-out buildings became sniper nests, machine gun posts, and ambush points. German tanks, so effective in open country, became useless in narrow streets, choked with debris. This was the birth of Rattenkrieg, the Rat War. Fighting moved into basements, staircases, and single rooms. Soldiers said a building might change hands a dozen times in a single day. The ground floor held by Germans, the floor above by Soviets. But the destruction created an unexpected problem for the Germans. The rubble became a fortress. Wide streets turned into deadly kill zones. Bombed-out buildings became sniper nests, machine gun posts, and ambush points. German tanks, so effective in open country, became useless in narrow streets, choked with debris. This was the birth of Rattenkrieg, the Rat War. Fighting moved into basements, staircases, and single rooms. Soldiers said a building might change hands a dozen times in a single day. The ground floor held by Germans, the floor above by Soviets. Life expectancy for a newly arrived Soviet soldier crossing the Volga into Stalingrad was sometimes measured in hours, not days. Soviet reinforcements were ferried across the river under constant artillery and air attack. Many boats never reached the other side. One of the most famous battlegrounds was a single apartment block, later known as Pavlov's house, held by a small group of Soviet soldiers for nearly 2 months against repeated German assaults. It became a symbol of Soviet resistance, a handful of men holding ground that entire battalions couldn't take. Snipers became legends on both sides. Soviet sharpshooter Vasily Zaitsev is said to have killed over 200 enemy soldiers during the battle, his duel with a German sniper later becoming the stuff of legend and film. But behind every story of heroism was staggering suffering. Civilians trapped in the city faced starvation, freezing temperatures, and constant crossfire. Soldiers on both sides fought with dwindling ammunition, disease, and, as winter set in, brutal cold that killed as efficiently as any bullet. By November 1942, the German Sixth Army was exhausted, stretched thin, and dangerously overextended, fighting street by street, while its flanks were defended by weaker Romanian, Italian, and Hungarian units. The Soviets saw their opportunity. On November 19, 1942, they launched Operation Uranus, a massive pincer movement striking the weak flanks north and south of the city. Within 4 days, Soviet forces linked up west of Stalingrad, completely encircling the German Sixth Army. Roughly 250,000 to 300,000 men trapped inside what became known as the Kessel, or the Cauldron. Hitler refused to allow a breakout. He ordered Paulus to hold his position, promising an aerial supply operation that the Luftwaffe could never realistically sustain. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein's relief force, sent to break the encirclement, was stopped short. Trapped inside the Kessel, German soldiers faced a nightmare. Temperatures fell to -30 degrees Celsius. Food rations shrank to almost nothing. Horses were eaten. Frostbite claimed fingers, toes, and lives. Disease spread through the starving, freezing troops. The promised airlift delivered only a fraction of the supplies needed, often less than a tenth of daily requirements. Soviet forces tightened the ring, splitting the pocket in two by January 1943. On January 30th, 1943, the 10th anniversary of Hitler's rise to power, Hitler promoted Paulus to Field Marshal. It was a pointed message. No German field marshal had ever surrendered. Hitler expected Paulus to fight to the death or take his own life. Paulus did neither. On January 31st, 1943, Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus surrendered the southern pocket of German forces. The northern pocket surrendered on February 2nd. It was the first time in the war that an entire German field army had been destroyed and its commander taken prisoner. Of the roughly 91,000 German and Axis soldiers taken prisoner, only a few thousand would ever return home. Most died in Soviet captivity from disease, starvation, and the brutal conditions of forced labor camps in the years that followed. Germany had lost an entire army. Hitler declared 3 days of national mourning. It was the first time Nazi Germany publicly admitted to a catastrophic defeat. The scale of loss at Stalingrad is almost impossible to comprehend. Estimates vary, but historians generally agree the battle produced somewhere between 1.7 and 2 million total casualties, killed, wounded, captured, or missing, from both sides combined, including significant civilian deaths. To put that in perspective, the entire Battle of Stalingrad, in 5 to 6 months, may have produced more casualties than the United States suffered in the whole of World War II. This is why historians so often call it not just a turning point, but the single bloodiest battle in human history. Stalingrad was the psychological and strategic turning point of the war in Europe. Before Stalingrad, Nazi Germany had known only advance. After Stalingrad, it knew only retreat. The myth of German invincibility was broken, not in the deserts of North Africa, not on the beaches of Normandy, but in the frozen ruins of a city on the Volga. From this point forward, the Soviet Red Army began its long, brutal push westward, a push that would end, 2 years later, in the ruins of Berlin itself. Today, a colossal statue overlooks the city, now called Volgograd, a mother figure raising a sword to the sky, commemorating the dead. Beneath her, in the earth, still lie the remains of soldiers never recovered. Stalingrad was not just a battle for a city. It was a battle for the direction of the entire 20th century. And its cost, in blood, in suffering, in human endurance, remains almost beyond comprehension. End card. The Battle of Stalingrad, August 1942 to February 1943.